Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Elizabeth Castelli, and I'm the director of the Barnard Center for Research on Women. We're here this evening for a conversation between Marr Jurelle Bruce, the author of the brilliant and harrowing book, How to Go Mad Without Losing Your Mind. Conversation between Bruce and Farah Jasmine Griffin, our distinguished colleague and friend from across the street at Columbia. I'll introduce our guests more fully in a moment, but I want to begin with some words of gratitude. Many thanks to everyone at BCRW, since every person who works at the center participates in the work that culminates in our public programming. So I want to thank Pam Phillips, our senior program assistant, communications and program manager Avi Cummings, who is also responsible for conceiving of this evening's event, creative director Hope Dechter, and post-baccalaureate fellow Sophie Kreitzberg, who are both working behind the scenes on the tech for this evening's presentation, as well as student research assistant Miska Lewis, and the newest member of BCRW's team, Senior Associate Director Miriam Neptune. This is an amazing group of colleagues, and every one of them contributes to the success of the work of the center. I'm very grateful to have the chance to work with all of them. I also want to acknowledge the singular contributions of our ASL interpreters, Yakata Nichols and Gloshanda Lawyer, and our live captioner, Caitlin Morey. You can find the link for the captions for this event both on the page for this event on BCRW's website and also right below the video on YouTube. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to introduce this evening's guests to you. Marr Jurelle Bruce is Associate Professor of American Studies at the University of Maryland, where he is also affiliated with African American Studies, Music, Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies, and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. His areas of interest and expertise include Africana literature and performance, U.S. popular culture, queer theory, psychoanalysis, mad studies, and especially the art and aesthetics of quotidian Black lives. He is also the author of the book we're here to celebrate and discuss tonight, How to Go Mad Without Losing Your Mind, Madness and Black Radical Creativity. Here, I will show you the cover of the book, published in June 2021 by Duke University Press. You can order the book from our book-selling partner, Word Up Community Bookshop, a volunteer-powered community bookshop and art space in Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan. And Marr is also sharing a discount code for the book in the chat should you want to order it directly from Duke University Press. Marr will be in conversation this evening with our colleague and friend, Farah Jasmine Griffin, who is William B. Ransford Professor of English and Comparative Literature and African American Studies, as well as Professor of African American and African Diaspora Studies at Columbia University. Farah is the author of numerous books, including Who Set You Flowin', The African American Migration Narrative, If You Can't Be Free, Be a Mystery, In Search of Billie Holiday, Harlem Nocturne, Women Artists and Progressive Politics During World War II, and most recently, Read Until You Understand the Profound Wisdom of Black Life and Literature. Together, these two colleagues will discuss How to Go Mad Without Losing Your Mind, a study of madness in the Black radical tradition. In this interdisciplinary work, Marr Bruce early on issues an invitation to all of us to inhabit an ethical position he names radical compassion. He writes, radical compassion, and here I'm quoting, to the mad persons, queer personae, ghosts, freaks, weirdos, imaginary friends, disembodied voices, unvoiced bodies, and unreasonable others who trespass like stowaways or fugitives in reasonable modernity, end quote. I suspect we will hear much more about this invitation into the vulnerable and open hearted mode of relationship and solidarity in tonight's conversation. Thank you for joining us this evening, and please join me in welcoming first Marr Jurelle Bruce and later Farah Jasmine Griffin to BCRW's virtual stage. Thank you.
Hello, friends. Thank you to Elizabeth Castelli, Avi Cummings, Sophie Kreitzberg, Hope Dector, and everyone else at the Barnard Center for Research on Women for organizing this gathering. I'm so grateful to be in conversation and collaboration and community with you all. Thunderous thanks and praise to Dr. Farah Jasmine Griffin. She arrived at Columbia University when I was a sophomore, and I was blessed to be her student during my sophomore year in her Toni Morrison seminar, and later in her Black Intellectuals Colloquium. Farah has always been a bright beacon and mighty bastion of brilliance and grace. I love her. Congratulations, Farah, on the recent publication of your magnificent book, Read Until You Understand, The Profound Wisdom of Black Life and Literature. And congratulations, furthermore, for simply being your magnificent self. You helped set so many of us flowing, as it were. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about my book, my baby, How to Go Mad Without Losing Your Mind. In particular, I want to highlight the critical importance of Black women and Black feminism in the book. I'll read a few passages interspersed with my comments and musings. So How to Go Mad is a study of 20th and 21st century Black artists who activate and mobilize madness in radical literature and performance, and more broadly toward radical art making, self-making, and world making. In the book, I propose that madness encompasses four primary meanings in the modern West. First is phenomenal madness, which is the lived experience of psychic turmoil and unruliness of mind, producing fundamental crises of perception, emotion, meaning, and selfhood. Second is medicalized madness, which refers to the psychiatric diagnosis of severe mental illness. Third is furious madness, the emotional state of intense and aggressive displeasure. Fourth and finally is psychosocial madness or psychosocial alterity, any drastic swerve away from psychosocial norms, any person, idea, or behavior that perplexes and vexes the psychosocial status quo is liable to be labeled crazy. Meanwhile, I describe reason, capital R reason, as a proper noun denoting a positivist, secularist, enlightenment-rooted epistemology purported to uphold objective truth while mapping and mastering the world. In normative Western philosophy since the Age of Enlightenment, reason and rationality are believed essential for achieving modern personhood, for joining civil society, and for participating in liberal politics. However, reason, capital R reason, has been entangled from those very Enlightenment roots with misogynist, colonialist, ableist, anti-Black, and other pernicious ideologies. So launching from these premises about madness and reason, I explore the mad in 20th and 21st century Black expressive culture. The book ponders the writings of Amiri Baraka, Toni Morrison, Ntozake Shange, Gayl Jones, Susan Lloyd Parks, and Richard Wright. In the jazz performances and lore around Buddy Bolden, Sun Ra, and Charles Mingus. In the protest music and public personae of Nina Simone, Ms. Lauryn Hill, and Kendrick Lamar, among many others. These artists adapt madness as subversive content, form, idiom, metaphor, aesthetic, existential posture, energy, strategy, and methodology in an enduring Black radical tradition. But beyond approaching madness as object of analysis, my project adapts madness as methodology. You see, madness is typically dismissed or disparaged, but my project finds potency and efficacy in madness and calls methods from madness. In this mad methodology, madness informs ethical ways of thinking, ways of feeling, ways of interpreting, ways of protesting, ways of encountering the world, and ways of life. Mad methodology chases and rides the unruly movements of madness without necessarily seeking to capture or possess what it chases. Mad methodology reads and hears and respects and amplifies and deploys the expressive power in the so-called rants and raves of mad persons, what I call the idioms of madness. Mad methodology historicizes and contextualizes madness as a social construction and social relation vis-a-vis reason. Mad methodology recognizes that there are phenomena in this world and other worlds, including so-called mad phenomena, that cannot be measured empirically, that cannot be comprehended with certainty and transparency. Most urgently, mad methodology primes us to extend radical compassion. Radical compassion is key here. Mad methodology primes us to extend radical compassion to those mad persons, queer personae, ghosts, freaks, weirdos, imaginary friends, disembodied voices, unvoiced bodies, and unreasonable others who trespass like stowaways or fugitives in reasonable modernity. Radical compassion is a will to care for, a commitment to feel with, a striving to learn from, and an openness to be vulnerable before a precarious other, though they may be drastically dissimilar to yourself. Radical compassion is not an appeal to an idyllic oneness where difference is blithely effaced, nor is it a smug projection of oneself into the position of another, thereby displacing that other. Nor is it an invitation to walk a mile in someone else's shoes and amble like a tourist through their life world, leaving them existentially barefoot all the while. Rather, radical compassion is an exhortation to ethically walk and sit and fight and build and study and work and maybe die alongside another whose condition may be utterly unlike your own. Radical compassion works to impart care, exchange feeling, transmit understanding, embolden vulnerability, and fortify solidarity across circumstantial, sociocultural, phenomenological, and ontological chasms in the interest of mutual liberation. So let's dive in. My book's title was inspired in part by some remarks that the Nobel laureate Toni Morrison uttered during a 1991 interview with Paul Gilroy. Regarding Black women in colonial and antebellum America, she said, quote, "Black women had to deal with postmodern problems in the 19th century and earlier, certain kinds of dissolution, the loss of and the need to reconstruct certain kinds of stability. Certain kinds of madness, deliberately going mad in order to not to lose your mind." Morrison suggests that going mad was sometimes a strategy to doggedly clutch hold of one's mind when reason would steal or smash it. If reason is benefactor of white supremacy, if reason is proponent of anti-Black slavocracy, if reason is underwriter of patriarchal dominion, an enslaved Black woman might fare better going insane instead. Rather than remain captive behind the barbed fences of plantation sanity, she might find refuge, however tenuous, vexed, and incomplete, in the fugitivity of madness. So from here on out, I'm going to read and remark on 3 chapters from the book. Chapter 3, which is called The Bloodstained Bed and concerns Gayl Jones' 1976 novel Eva's Man, and Gail Jones's corpus more broadly. Then there's chapter 4, which is called A Portrait of the Artist as a Mad Black Woman, which concerns Ntozake Shange's 1994 novel Lillian, and also concerns Shange's broader corpus of writing. And then there's chapter 5, The People Inside My Head Too. Ms. Lauryn Hill sings truth to power in the key of madness, which centers Ms. Lauryn Hill's performance and persona, especially between 2001 and 2012.
Hi, Lamar. I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to quickly let you know we've had a few requests for you to speak a little bit slower for the ASL interpreters and a few people in the audience.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So Gail Jones' 1976 novel, Eva's Man, is a grim story of precarity, violence, madness, and dogged agency amid it all. Eva Canada, the novel's protagonist, is born in rural Georgia in 1937 and raised in New York City in the 1940s and 1950s. And she's beset by sexual predation and abuse from childhood onward by various men and boys. Content warning here. Told entirely from Eva's perspective, the novel entails both an impressionistic depiction of her psychic life and a stark chronicle of her social world. At age 38, While lounging in a blues club in upstate New York, Eva meets a man named Davis Carter, a domineering man who objectifies her like many others before him. He invites her to his home and pressures her to remain there for a few days. The two plan to have sex once her period subsides. Soon after they have sex, and with no warning or explanation, Eva lethally poisons him, maims him, and leaves his lifeless body on the bed, although they take precautions to keep menstruation from staining the sheets. Mutilation bloodies the bed after all. Eva is later incarcerated in a psychiatric prison from which she tells her tale. In naming this chapter, The Bloodstained Bed, I mean to evoke and echo Frederick Douglass's description of the bloodstained gate in his 1845 narrative. After recounting the torture of his Aunt Hester by a slaveholder, Douglass discloses that, quote, "It was the first of a long series of outrages of which I was doomed to be a witness and a participant. It struck me with awful force. It was the blood-stained gate, the entrance to the hell of slavery through which I was about to pass. Such ghastly cruelty was a crucible where enslaved subjectivity was forged. If the bloodstained gate signifies the violent subjection and subjectification of enslaved people, this bloodstained bed evokes the sexual violence central to the subject formation of the enslaved and many among their descendants. There is a trail of blood running from the gate to the bed, from the brutality of chattel slavery to the brutality of its afterlives and reincarnations. In foregrounding the bloodstained bed, I reiterate what feminist theorists and historians like Hazel Carby, Darlene Clark Hine, Saadia Hartman, and Daniel McGuire have revealed. The fact of sexual violence, the fear of sexual violence, and the aftermath of sexual violence have terrorized and also galvanized the political subjectivities of Black girls and women and all Black people. I suggest that Eva manifests a psychosocial madness in her radical violation of ethical and moral norms. She manifests a furious madness in her eruption of outrage against the slow violence which has assailed her all her life. She manifests a phenomenal madness in the many sort of opaque and disorienting passages of the book in which her unruliness of mind is dramatized. And insofar as she lands in a psychiatric prison, she is marked with medical madness, likely labeled antisocial and perhaps schizophrenic by forensic authorities. So the principal assertion of my chapter, The Bloodstained Bed, is that Eva's madness is not merely a site of abjection, but also a locus of beleaguered agency. She generates a mad and maddening narrativity that she marshals for self-protection and self-assertion amid dire danger. I want to home in on one section from the chapter. In her review of the novel, Black feminist warrior poet Audre Lorde writes, quote, "Repeated like a depraved slideshow rather than the terrible acts of brutalized people, the human destructiveness within Eva's man erupts without feeling or understanding, without context, and so it can exist safely separate from ourselves and our own angers. Eva Canada has no quest for self, only unsatisfied hunger, hurt, and mute revenge," unquote. So I agree with Lorde on two accounts. First, the phrase, quote, "repeated slideshow of depravity," unquote, is a trenchant description of the traumatic visions that repeatedly invade Eva's consciousness. Second, the book certainly resists and thwarts, quote unquote, understanding. However, I want to respectfully challenge Lorde's assertion that, quote, "the human destructiveness of the book can exist safely separate from ourselves and our own angers," unquote. If this safe separation exists, it should not be naturalized and accepted as a foregone conclusion. Instead, such a separation should be actively surmounted. I propose a mad methodology that disallows easy distancing of Eva from our lives, that emphasizes context and activates compassion to reveal the nearness of Eva to us all. Here is the bloody heart of the matter. Whether native, settler, enslaved, slaver, colonizer, colonized, capitalist, commodity, consumer, consumed, or their descendants, we are all heirs to this world historical, quote unquote, human destructiveness. Of course, we don't all receive the same parcel of that inheritance. Some of us inherit a heightened susceptibility to being destroyed by that human destructiveness, while some of us stand to inherit the spoils of such destruction. As a poor Black girl and woman, Eva is especially vulnerable to structural collusions of anti-Blackness, misogyny, sexual violence, racial capitalism, and carcerality. Right? It's critical to attend to her particular precarity, even as we acknowledge that this human destructiveness, and again, human destructiveness is Audre Lorde's term, this human destructiveness imperils and/or implicates every person on earth. Ultimately, all of us are bound to Eva by blood, blood on our hands, blood in our veins, blood from our wounds, blood at the root, blood on the gate, or blood on the bed. When I use the phrase blood at the root, I'm thinking about Billie Holiday's work. I'm thinking about Strange Fruit. So again, I'll repeat that. All of us are bound to Eva by blood, whether it's blood on our hands, blood in our veins, blood from our wounds, blood at the root, blood on the gate, or blood on the bed. No one is clean. By this accounting, none of us can, quote, exist safely separate from Eva Canada. So there, I'm trying to activate a sort of radical compassion in relation to Eva Canada, whose deed is so violent and so appalling to many that it perhaps tests the sort of stamina, right, of our radical compassion. Shifting gears a bit, in my book's 4th chapter, and there is the cover of Eva's Mind and an image from the 1970s of Gail Jones. In my book's 4th chapter, A Portrait of the Artist as a Mad Black Woman, I read Ntozake Shange's 1994 experimental novel as a meditation on Black sublimation, where Black madness is raw material that is carved, stroked, strewn, tuned, burnished, finessed, and alchemized into art. I should note that Shange is a 1970 graduate of Barnard College. So the book's heroine is a woman named Lillian Bliss Lincoln. Born to Black elites in suburban New Jersey circa World War II, Lillian becomes an avant-garde performance artist, a painter, sculptor, sexual adventurer, cosmopolitan world wanderer, feminist, madwoman, and faithful patient of psychoanalysis. I'm going to briefly gloss over this chapter. Lillian's madness is an unruliness of mind, which she variously describes as a roar inside her head, as a feeling of existential vertigo, and as a sensation of existential strangulation. It's also an intense rage, a furious madness against misogynist and anti-Black antagonisms. It's also a medicalized process entailing regular visits to a mental health clinician. And it's also the psychosocial alterity of a brazen Black female sexuality that unabashedly flouts respectable psychonorms. Excuse me, there we go. The phrase "go out of one's mind" implies that the mind is an enclosure or container. Presumably, to stray outside that enclosure is to enter a mad wilderness, or to spill from the container is to be mired in a mad mess. In the chapter Portrait of the Artist as a Mad Black Woman, I ponder Lillian's propensity to overflow the enclosures of domesticity, of nation, of respectability, and even sanity that are erected around her and that intend to stifle her. Lillian overflows those partitions and containers. The cover art, as you see on the left, in this latest edition of Lillian, I think it attempts to illustrate her overflowing. Lillian is a magnificent, effervescent, kaleidoscopic mess. As I unfurl in the chapter, A Portrait of the Artist as a Mad Black Woman won't be kept in a tidy frame. In the introduction to her 1980 short story collection, 3 Pieces, Ntozake Shange describes and decries what she calls, quote, the straitjacket that the English language slips over the minds of all Americans. She views quote unquote American English as a structure of domination that violently constricts imagination, that enshrines white supremacist logics, that propagates anti-Black grammars, that thwarts insurgent expression, that chokes demands for freedom. I'm interested in this straitjacket metaphor, this mad metaphor. Shange's straitjacket metaphor conjures scenes of psychiatric confinement where some psychiatric captives are forced into this, what we might call a carceral garment, impairing the use of its wearer's hands and arms. The straitjacket is officially, supposedly, intended to prevent detainees from physically harming themselves and others, which is to say it's touted as a technology to thwart mad violence. In the process, the straitjacket exposes its captive to reasonable violence, both physical and metaphysical, potentially perpetrated by hospital personnel, profiteers, bureaucrats, the psychiatric industrial complex, and what we might call broader psychonormative cultures. The straitjacket accomplishes its harm not merely through physically fettering the so-called mad person, but by enacting a symbolic violence. It's a uniform of abjection clung tight to the body, announcing its wearer's degraded status, frustrating its captive's agency and dignity. If American English is a carceral garment, though, I ponder in relation to Shange's writings. Shange teaches us how to dance while caught in its binds and maybe wiggle free. Her oeuvre, again, and let's think about language, carceral garment, language as straitjacket. Her oeuvre abounds with Black vernaculars, complex wordplay, hood slangs, subversive syntax, beautiful curse words, mother wit, grammatical insurgency, incantatory phrases, orthographic insurrections, prophetic outbursts, feminist articulations, violent exclamations, and mad idioms, all working to unbind that straitjacket and split its seams. So I want to briefly mention, how could I not, Nina Simone, the preeminent protest musician of the US civil rights movement, whose song Mississippi Goddam is an act of critical, radical, ethical madness set to melody. I'm gonna skip, I wanna be conscientious of time and I'm eager for the conversation with Farah. I won't play this clip. Well, you know what? I'll play a brief moment of this clip. Real bad. Mass participation, unification, do things gradually, will bring much tragedy. Why don't you see it? Why don't you feel it? I don't know. So I played in particular Simone performing this song in the Netherlands in 1964. In this performance and others, fury seems to inflect her voice, to furrow her brow, to propel her arms as she pounds the piano in thunderous fortissimo, expressing her existential angst about deferred justice and deferred freedom, about the sort of relentless violence, the relentless, atrocious violence to which Black people are subjected in the United States and elsewhere. In addition to the rage that so vividly and resonantly is on display in this performance, three other modes of madness course through it. Simone invokes madness as unruliness of mind when she sings of that existential turmoil in the face of anti-Blackness. She performs psychosocial madness as a brazen Black woman shouting "goddamn" into the snarling face of Jim Crow, defying white supremacist anti-Black psychonorms of mid-20th century America. And furthermore, Simone lived with medicalized madness. In her autobiography, she details episodes of psychosis in the 1960s and describes symptoms later diagnosed as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. It bears note that Simone knew the power in mad performance, in a mad performance praxis, and sought to instrumentalize it for radical ends. Right? Describing her performance philosophy in the late 1960s, she divulged a desire to drive her audiences crazy, She said, I want to shake people up so bad that when they leave a nightclub where I performed, I just want them to be to pieces. I want to go in that den of those elegant people with their old ideas, smugness, and just drive them insane, right? So Simone here, in her broader performance oeuvre, she's not merely manifesting madness, she's attempting deliberately to activate it in her audiences. She longs to do righteous violence to smug audiences, to shatter their complacency and topple their smug sanity, making way for social transformation. Mississippi Goddamn does not merely describe violence, it does an aesthetic and representational violence that Simone wants to leverage, right, for revolutionary aims. So much more to say about that, but I want to pivot to Ms. Lauryn Hill before we get to the discussion. So, chapter 5 is called The People Inside My Head Too. Ms. Lauryn Hill sings Truth to Power in the Key of Madness. So now I turn to another brown-skinned Black woman and polymathic protest musician singing revolutionary sentiments in contralto tones, and also accused of being a madwoman, Ms. Lauryn Hill, who incidentally attended Columbia University briefly in the mid-1990s. Hill's debut solo album, 1998's Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, is an ambitious amalgam of social commentary and infectious grooves spanning and fusing hip-hop, R&B, soul, rock, reggae, gospel, and beyond. And Miseducation burst into the global music market, quickly becoming one of the most acclaimed and mega-selling hip-hop albums in history. Hill was hailed as musical genius and pop culture prophetess. By the time she recorded her follow-up album, Unplugged 2.0, the acoustic Unplugged 2.0 in 2001, Hill had supposedly fallen from the favor of the mainstream market, and to have pundits tell it, she had veered across that proverbially thin line set to separate genius from madness and prophecy from lunacy. When Hill recorded Unplugged in front of a live audience at MTV's Times Square Studios in 2001, she had shorn her trademark locks, removed what some called a quote-unquote forbiddingly perfect armor. She had dismissed the massive entourage of her miseducation days. She had repudiated her former persona and picked up a new set of accoutrements: a guitar, a stool, a frequently hoarse voice, and by many accounts, including her own, a bit of derangement. Madness is a frequent concern on Unplugged 2.0. So stories of devastating heartbreak, profound disillusionment with fame, outrage at the incursions of capitalism, spiritual epiphany, and a nervous breakdown have circulated as explanations for Hill's dramatic reinvention. It's significant that she herself refers to herself as quote unquote a mad scientist and quote unquote emotionally unstable and quote unquote deranged, crazy and deranged on the album. She uses this language to refer to herself. I'll give you an example. While addressing tabloid media reports, and this isn't an interlude on the album, tabloid media reports that she had gone crazy, Hill declares, yeah, I'm crazy and deranged, and I'm free. I might play these songs and twitch a little bit just so people know. Y'all think that's a curse? I'm telling you, it's a blessing. When I was a politician, boy, and she means a sort of politician of respectability during her miseducation days. When I was a politician, boy, everybody just all over me. I didn't have a private moment at all. Not one private moment. Now that people think I'm crazy and deranged, we have peace, total peace. And so listen, as far as I'm concerned, I'm crazy and deranged. As far as y'all know, I'm crazy and deranged. I'm emotionally unstable. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. She claims that her crazy and deranged reputation helps her preserve privacy. Perhaps her madness scares or bores or confounds interlopers enough to keep them at bay, granting her the space to find quote unquote freedom and quote unquote peace. Hill jests that she might quote play these songs with a twitch, play these songs and twitch a little bit just so people know that she's mad. A twitch is an abrupt and unruly bodily spasm, typically associated with mental and or neurological disability. Hill claims the twitch as a gesture within an embodied idiom of madness, as a visual corporeal cue in a mad performance repertoire, as a kinesthetic sign that might be brandished to convey madness and ward off unwanted attention. When Hill further proclaims, "That's my story, and I'm sticking to it," she hints that there may be some other truth, some covert and withheld knowledge beneath the story she tells. She's practicing opacity here. To close, I want to briefly talk about how Hill instrumentalizes furious madness in a searing song called Black Rage. The song is sung to the melody of Rodgers and Hammerstein's popular show tune, My Favorite Things. Performing the song in October 2012 at a concert in Houston, Texas, Hill retains the melody and lyrical meter of My Favorite Things, but she otherwise drastically alters the tune. Her rendition entails an accelerated tempo, a hard and driving drum beat, a dissonant staccato piano, a blaring electric guitar, and rapid-fire vocal delivery. Most poignantly, Hill subverts the original song's cheery disposition with woeful new lyrics, and I'm going to play for you a little bit from Black Rage. Black rape is criminal, two-thirds a person. Rapings and beatings and suffering's the worst. Black human packages tied up in strings. Black rage is found in all these passages. Rage is founded on blatant denial and squeezed economics, subsistence, survival, deafening silence and social control. And black rage is found in all those other shows. So when those black, when a beat takes, when feelings say, I see here and all these kind of things, and feel I don't feel so bad. Okay. So, where the phrase raindrops resides in the original song, Hill replaces it with Black Rage. Whiskers on kittens is exchanged for two-thirds a person. The verse, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, is supplanted by rapings and beatings and suffering that worsens. Brown paper packages tied up with strings are traded for Black human packages tied up in strings, no longer a litany of childlike whimsies and delectable objects like the original song. Hill recasts it as a sinister inventory of violence, oppression, terror, and death. In additional lyrics, Hill scathingly indicts anti-Blackness, invoking slavery, lynching, rape, racial capitalism, state-sanctioned police brutality, psychic violence, and myriad other atrocities. If the original song, My Favorite Things, is a sweet confection of idyllic fancies, Hill suggests that Black slave labor and exploitation has cut the cane to provide such sweetness. And I'll repeat that. Hill suggests that Black slave labor and exploitation has cut the cane to provide such sweetness. Remarkably, the recitation of these atrocities comforts Hill. She proclaims, I simply remember these kinds of things and then I don't fear so bad. Knowing the harrowing history of Black rage inspires her, empowers her to critically process it and use it, right? With Black Rage, Hill takes up the mantle of Nina Simone. Indeed, the song isn't simply a description of Black fury. It is an act of Black fury, full of intensity and ferocity, instrumentalized for pedagogical and inspirational effect. I'll stop there, eager as I am for conversation with Dr. Griffin. Thank you.
Wow. I mean, I could have just listened to you go on and on and on. Even having read this, just hearing you talk about it is just really extraordinary. I want to congratulate you on this brilliant book. Brilliant and insightful and incisive and original and beautifully written. I read through it and then I realized immediately I needed to go back and read again. So thank you. Thank you for this
Thank you.
so much. And just when you were just talking about that Lauryn Hill, I'm wondering if I'm making this up. Like, I have a memory of her performing around the time of the MTV thing, maybe afterwards at Carnegie Hall. Were we there? Were you at that I feel like we were both at the concert, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was around that period, the period that you write so eloquently about here. So
just reminds me that I have known you for lifetimes.
A long time. I just remember us kind of streaming out of that and talking about how she held us in the palm of her hand.
Yes.
And it was the acoustic period of
yes.
Lauryn Hill.
Yes.
So let's get right to it. I have so many questions, and I want to go back to the beginning of the book, the early pages, even before we get to that opening chapter, to ask you about the dedication. Because in the dedication, you say, "In love and madness, words fail." And then you follow us with this, book full of extraordinary words about madness written in love in some ways. So what did you mean when you said, "In love and madness, words fail"?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So I am a lover and a madman. I know love and madness well. I love language too. And in my experience, language sometimes breaks, it comes undone, it fails, it dissolves amid the force of love and of madness. In the past year, I've experienced some staggering grief. And I've been thinking about the ways in which grief is a convergence of love and madness. Grief is a convergence of sort of the sublime love I felt and feel for someone who passed away recently, who left me. A convergence of that sublime love and the sort of terrible madness in the face of his departure. And you write beautifully about grief in Read Until You Understand. So love and madness. I'm interested in forces and phenomena that evade language broadly and evade knowing, perhaps, and require that we take solace and find recourse in feeling instead, right? So much of sort of the project of Western post-Enlightenment philosophy and scholarship more broadly is about attempting to transparently reveal phenomena, to know, to understand. Mm-hmm. And love and madness, as I've experienced them both, tell me otherwise. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when we can't know, we can find recourse in feeling. And I've tried to write a book, and I'm so grateful to hear that the book moved you as it did and that you found it to be beautiful. That beauty and more broadly a commitment to sensuous writing is in part because I want to give you something you can feel. Shout out to Curtis Mayfield and Aretha Franklin. I want to give you something you can feel when knowing is impossible. And here's the thing, what I say in that introduction, I say, in love and madness, words fail, but I keep trying. Right. And so I'm not discouraged. In fact, I'm galvanized by the fact that all the beautiful tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of words that I can generate it might be asymptotic. It might approach ever more closely the thing I'm trying to describe, might never reach, but I'm fine with that. It keeps me going. It animates me. It keeps me vigilant. And keep trying. The book, and I know it's ironic to begin a book, in love and madness, words fail, but I keep trying. I'm beginning a book on madness, with the proclamation that words are going to fail. But I want to live in that ambivalence, that uncertainty, that frustration. Frustration is like a genre of inspiration for me. Mm-hmm. So yes.
No, I hear that. I would imagine that that's true of the artists about whom you write too, right? That there's a reaching, like there's always an aspiration, a trying,
Yes.
Even if one starts out with the impossibility of
Yes.
what they're doing. And I think about that even with the musicians that you write about, or when I was listening to Lauryn Hill's That Black Rage, which, Julie Andrews sang and the Supreme sang, and then
Yes.
Coltrane played too,
Yes.
where language fails. So
Yes.
it's just a beautiful dedication and says so much about the book.
Thank you.
Why madness as a way of thinking about the Black radical tradition? Why was that an entry point for you?
So in general, I'm intrigued by Black radical creativity that disrupts status quos and defies structures of domination, that imagines and models and realizes radically different ways of being. And in my studies of Black radical creativity, over and over, I've encountered madness as a theme and concern. Both madness is a label that is sometimes violently thrust upon transgressive artists, but also madness is a sort of a banner under which a number of tortured artists have amassed themselves time and time again. So I think about, for example, jazz and the blues. It's a fascinating coincidence that a man sometimes credited as the inventor of jazz music, and we know jazz was not invented by one man. Jazz was the sort of collective collaboration of an ensemble of people over centuries, from West African griots to enslaved people in Congo Square to reconstruction troubadours, right? But the man, Buddy Bolden, a turn of the 20th century ragtime musician credited by some as the inventor of jazz music, while marching in a Labor Day parade in 1906, he had some sort of breakdown and soon thereafter spent 25 years in a rural Louisiana, in the colored ward of a rural Louisiana insane asylum where he died destitute. So I think about this madman who presides at the sort of beginning of quote unquote jazz, or the popularization of jazz music, but spends the jazz age in an insane asylum. Then I think about so there's jazz. Then I think about the first vocal blues recording, Mamie Smith's Crazy Blues, right? Not lonely blues, not brokenhearted blues, but crazy blues. And our dear Daphne Brooks writes exquisitely about this. What does it mean that a crazy blues woman and a mad jazz man, right, might be said to preside at or to haunt the inauguration of these critical Black cultural forms in the 20th century? And again, madness abounds within these sort of Black expressive cultural innovations. I'm also interested in madness insofar as I said this a moment ago, and I might have sounded facetious when I said it. I self-identify as a madman. I think about my own complicated and dynamic relationship to madness. The afterword of the book is called The Nutty Professor, A Confession. And it's in conversation with Richard Wright, Frantz Fanon, Ida B. Wells, and others as I ponder my own severe OCD, which I sometimes experience as a brutal unruliness of mind, which has been both debilitating and galvanizing, and sometimes both at the same time. So part of why I pursued this project is I wanted to think with, about, and alongside others who've experienced a sort of complex relationship to madness. So those are some of the reasons.
It's you took me where I was planning to end, so I'm going to come back to that that sort of confession, right, of the nutty professor, because as I was reading it, and you were describing what you're confessing as your madness, like but some of us read this exact same description And it's a description of one's brilliance, the constantly questioning mind, the lack of satisfaction, the going back to find out the answers, and that it's also the brilliance, and it's the brilliance of that radical tradition as well. So you, in your presentation, what you chose from your chapters were three women, excuse me, three Lillian Ntozake's character, and Eva, Gayl Jones is in the news again now.
Yes.
And Lauryn Hill and Nina Simone. So those women are kind of at the center. You also talk about men in the book, but I wanted to talk about theoretically what Black feminism has informed, how it's informed you.
Yes. Yes. Black feminism has inspired, influenced, propelled me in so many ways. In relation to the project, well, first, Black feminism has modeled for me the critical, radical, ethical efficacy in rage. Black feminism has taught me that rage need not be an obstruction to political praxis, but can animate and galvanize such praxis, right? So I'm thinking about, such a long litany here. I'm thinking about Black feminists from Audre Lorde, of course, in The Uses of Anger, to Bell Hooks, right? What's her book called? Killing Rage. To more recently, Brittany Cooper's Eloquent Rage, Bettina Judd's Anger as Methodology, Solange Knowles, her song Mad, off the Seat at the Table album. Just this month, Black feminist theologian Maisha Cherry published a book, I think the Case for Rage. And a magnificent scholar by the name of Farah Jasmine Griffin, in a book called Read Until You Understand, right, writes about rage, right? All of y'all illuminate that the figure of the mad Black woman, the angry Black woman, frequently like conjured as a caricature by anti-Black and misogynist interests. You all have reminded us that an angry Black woman can be a dynamic and critical protagonist in Black liberation struggles, right? Ida B. Wells was an angry Black woman. Fannie Lou Hamer was angry. Nina Simone was angry. And again, that anger animated, electrified liberation praxis. There's so many other ways. I think Black feminism also models for me theorizing from felt and lived experience. And I can go down a litany of people from Deborah McDowell to Patricia J. Williams to Christina Sharp, Kagura Macharia, Nicole Fleetwood, who theorize from felt and lived experience. You certainly, in Read Until You Understand, right? And in the process, you all practice and model instrumental, powerful, critical vulnerability, right? In theorizing from experience and from practicing an instrumental vulnerability, y'all give lie to the veneer of objectivity and imperviousness that actually characterizes most scholarship in modern academia. Another thing, I can go on about Black feminism forever, but I want to just name the names of as many Black feminists as possible to sort of call them, hail them together. Black feminism has also reminded me of the fact that, and some phenomena cannot be known for sure, cannot be revealed transparently. And there's a richness, even a power in the ensuing opacity, right? As far as opacity or uncertainty, I'm thinking about Saidiya Hartman's critical fabulation, right? In the face of the unknowable, the unimaginable. I'm thinking about Hazel Carby, who posits Black feminist criticism as like a problem, a locus of contradiction, who's willing to sit in that unknowability, that irresolvability, right? I'm thinking about your book, If You Can't Be Free, Be a Mystery, right? That phrase that you borrowed from Rita Dove for the title of your biography of Billie Holiday. If you can't be free, be a mystery. I hear that title as a prompt and provocation. I'm interested, I'm thinking about that title, If You Can't Be Free, Be a Mystery, and then the title, Read Until You Understand. The way that both titles are prompts that can direct us in particular ways, right? So all of this willingness to sit in the unknowable, the irresolvable, the contradictory, the ambivalent has helped embolden me as I think through and about and with madness, right? That evades understanding, that refuses knowing, that engenders ambivalence.
Absolutely. And to do that the way that you do, to sit with the unknowable, is so generative. It yields such richness in these pages. It's just, you practice what you preach and teach us certainly in the process. I want to ask you, because there's so many, this book is so carefully put together and constructed with such care and creativity. So I started out by asking you about the dedication, and then about the kind of things that are informing you theoretically, and what your motivations are. But even at the level of epigraph in your chapters, they're selected with such care, and they generate the kind of ongoing conversation. So one of them, you stage a kind of encounter, you stage an encounter between two ships, the slave ship and the ship of fools, in quotations by Hortense Spillers and Foucault. And I wondered if you, in doing that, you give us two marginalized populations, two critical discourses, right? And at some point you say the slave ship helps to orient the ship of fools, helps to orient Western notions of madness and reason. And I just want to hear you talk about that. I want to hear you say a little bit more about that staging and what it yields for you.
Yes. So I think about the sort of canon of Enlightenment philosophy, books like Kant and Hegel and Hume, right? They imagine a certain Eurocentric Western modernity with its attendant structures of reason and humanness and civility in direct opposition to Blackness, to Africanity, right? So Blackness and Africanity become what I describe as ontological foils that, and many people have written about this on various registers, particularly recently when it comes in relation to the human, the ways in which sort of Western Enlightenment humanness is constructed in opposition to in opposition to Blackness. But I'm thinking about that as specifically as it concerns reason, right? So reason is only cohesive and coherent to itself. And when I say reason, again, I'm talking about this colonialist, Eurocentric, patriarchal, anti-Black framework, capital R reason. It's only coherent and cohesive to itself because it can position these ontological others in stark contrast. So when I say that the slave ship tows the ship of fools, orients the ship of fools, what I'm suggesting is that these sort of modern fantasies of Blackness, these anti-Black fantasies of Africanity are constitutive for the whole project of reason. And again, I wanted to make that point in as sensuous a way as possible, right? So rather than just describe this abstractly, I ask you as reader to come along with me as I imagine the scene of a ship of fools and a slave ship encountering in this abyss. Right? That's how I start the book. I start the book with the words, hold tight, right, as I'm preparing you for a turbulent voyage. And then I end the book with let go. And in some respects, the entire book might be viewed as a set of parentheticals between those two prompts. I'm interested in the prompt as a rhetorical mode. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. How did you choose the artists who you chose? Like your group of artists.
Yes.
And so, here I am, and I'm riding with you on the Lauryn Hill chapter, and then you bring in Kanye and you bring in Kendrick Lamar, and I'm like, oh my God, I want a whole chapter on those.
Yeah.
So how do you decide who are your major players and who are your then supporting players in that story?
So all of the major players, I had one key criterion. All of the major players at some point themselves had embraced the language of madness, had self-identified as mad on some register. That was key for me. So I wasn't merely, this is among the primary protagonists in the book. And those primary protagonists, there are many secondary protagonists, but the primary protagonists are Gayl Jones, Ntozake Shange, Dave Chappelle, Lauryn Hill,
Sun
Ra, Charles Mingus. All of those people at some point on some register, again, use language. I think about madness. I think about the sort of significatory cohort of madness, crazy, undone, wild, that these people self-describe with that language at some point. Also outraged, right? At some point, that is central to their personae. Not incidental, but key and instrumental. So that was important, because when I've told people early in the process of working on the dissertation and later the book, people would always say, "Oh, what about this or that or the other person?" Like, "Oh, what about, I don't know, Michael Jackson, for example?" And I thought, Michael Jackson, perhaps I could have written about Michael Jackson, but he didn't seem to activate and mobilize madness within a critical praxis the way that some of the protagonists who I centered have. Mm-hmm. So yes, that was key for me. And then what was key also was that each primary protagonist was involved in the project of radical creativity. Each protagonist innovates Black expressive culture in fascinating ways, does some iconoclastic work. Mm-hmm. But there were a number of people who I wish I could have engaged more deeply. For example, Gloria Naylor has this novel, what's it called, 1996? I get the year wrong. That some read as, and I first encountered Gloria Naylor in your class, in your Toni Morrison class. I love you put Toni Morrison in conversation with other authors, mm-hmm. and we read Gloria Naylor's Mama Day.
That's right.
Which I love, and I wish Gloria Naylor received more critical attention. But Gloria Naylor, 1996, sort of dissolves these genre boundaries. Some have read it to be a partial memoir, some of a sort of fictionalized account of a paranoia. Yeah. I wanted to, at one point, write about George C. Wolfe's Colored Museum. Remember, at the end, there's that proclamation, there's madness in me and my madness sets me free. At one point, I wanted to write about Kara Walker's Silhouettes. At one point, Samuel Delaney's novel, The Madman, was among my primary objects of analysis. So there's so much more that I could have engaged.
Well, you've done so much. I mean, and it's so capacious that I would imagine that there are already people taking this method, taking what you've given us and using it for their own readings and projects. I mean, it's a book that creates that kind of possibility, I think, for critical and creative thinkers. And I don't mean to separate those things because critical/creative thinkers. Yes. So the book came out in the spring, is that right?
In June. Yeah.
So what has been the response so far? I've been seeing you going around doing talks, and I know people are engaging and encountering it. What has the response been like?
So for the past few months, folks have been posting images and sending me images of the book, particularly the book in their hands. A few months back, and I've talked about this before, someone posted a picture of themselves holding the book in front of a field of daisies. And it dawned upon me, I've never seen a field of daisies in person. Someone else sent me an image of the book under like the Sicilian sky at twilight. Right? I've never seen a Sicilian sky at twilight. And I've thought about, I spent a lot of time thinking about the fact that the book will travel to places that I'll never see. It'll meet people who I will never know. It will provoke arguments that I'll never hear. It will rest on tables and other surfaces that I'll never feel, right? It'll be held in hands that I'll never shake, that I'll never hold. I think about the book as a living thing, and I think about the fact that it will outlive me, right? It's going to co-create worlds that I'll never know or inhabit, right? When you read the book, your imagination, right, interacts with my words. You'll create something new. You'll generate new ideas and conjure worlds that I've never even imagined, that I've never even fathomed, right? Another thing recently, I've seen people post pictures of the notes and doodles that they jot in the margins or between the lines or on top of my writing. And I love that. I think I was just posting about this recently. Everyone should read with a pen or pencil, a highlighter in hand, or crayon for that matter, to scribble your musings, to doodle while you wonder, right? To superimpose your words on top of mine or juxtapose them alongside mine, to co-write with me, like come co-write with me, another prompt. So I love that. Another thing that I find really intriguing, poets and preachers.
Okay.
Yes, poets and preachers have been especially moved by the book. I like to think that that's because of my care with language. I love the word care, and I always think about two adjective forms of care, caring and careful. I always try to be both caring and careful. And I think poets and preachers appreciate language as a tool of exhortation, and also language as something that should be uttered and performed passionately, right? The words in my book avail themselves to passionate utterance. I want you to utter them aloud, passionately. And I've suffused my words with that want. I want you to read this aloud passionately.
There are sentences that beg to be read aloud. And I'm not surprised by the poets at all, because in many places in this book, you yourself are a poet. The way that you juxtapose images and language and just, so that doesn't surprise me. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised by the preachers either. And actually, now that you say it, I think that there could be a book that looks at certain figures from the sort of religious context or the spiritual context, who also would be discussed as madmen.
Yes, yes.
Right. So it makes so much sense that
In relation to Lauryn Hill, I think about what I call the attempted Cassandrification of Lauryn Hill, right? If we think about Greco-Roman mythology and cosmology, Cassandra was a prophetess who, because she spurned the advances of Apollo, she was cursed so that no one would believe her prophecies. Her prophecies would come true, but no one would believe her, and they dismiss her as a madwoman. And I think about how Lauryn Hill sort of refused the advances of a certain Apollo maybe as a personification and deification of certain structures of power, and how that resistance, right, earned her the label of mad. And we can think about this within biblical text, right? Jesus Christ was called madman, and there's a tradition of insurgent prophets,
right,
framed as crazy. So,
framed as madmen. I think I see a wonderful question that I want to share with you, but I was thinking I think Salamisha Tillett is working on kind of Black women as Cassandras. So it's really interesting to hear you say that. Here is a question that says, I'm wondering if you looked into any dance artists, or if your book would resonate with the dance artist, because this person says, I think that would be an amazing convergence. Had you thought about dance artists? Had you thought about dance?
Well, in the passage that I read, one of the passages that I read from the Lauryn Hill chapter, I talk about the sort of twitch in a sort of, what would it mean to think about the twitch within a sort of choreographic idiom of madness, which is what Lauryn Hill is suggesting. She's suggesting that she might incorporate a twitch into her performance, right, in order to communicate an insurgent madness to audiences. So I've thought a lot about embodied madness, how madness appears on and emanates from the body, not extensively as it might be manifested in choreography, but more broadly, right? What do when we think about the mad person, what are the movements we associate? Is it the twitch? Is it a sort of pacing? Is it a dart and bound? Is it an unseemly stillness? Also, I think about the sort of how we imagine madness to be vocalized: rant and ramble, howl, stuttering, stammering, moaning, murmuring, shrieking. I've thought a lot about how these mad utterances have been set to music. You introduced me to Abby Lincoln as an undergraduate, and I think about Abby Lincoln's collaboration with Max Roach, right? And the ways in which she's on the Freedom Now suite, right? Those shrieks, those howls, those screeches are on some registers an attempt to vocalize an existential anguish in the face of anti-Blackness. So we can think about mad choreographies, we can think about mad sort of vocalizations as they manifest on the stage.
I actually love that. I mean, the vocalizations where language breaks down.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is what we opened this up with. Here's another question. Can you talk about agency, control, surrender, agency / control / surrender / in the context of your thinking?
Yeah, agency, control, and surrender. Yeah. So I try to be conscientious to really pay attention to the unwieldiness of madness. Madness can't always be harnessed. And I actually regret there are some passages in the book where I talk about harnessing madness, and where I feel like that might not be the ideal verb. because madness, and madness is infinitely variable, but some experience madness as categorically as that which refuses to be harnessed or controlled, right? I like the language of riding it rather than harnessing it, right? In which case, the ride might take us to places we don't anticipate going. It might fling us off. It might fling us off its back. It might give us whiplash. It might give us vertigo. But what does it mean to try to hold tight to it and ride it rather than harness it? So, so madness is a place, and theorizing madness is a really an occasion and an opportunity to think through living without the agency to always take control, to possess, to master. It's an occasion to think through how we grapple with, how we engage, how we encounter without control. Surrender. And when you think about hold tight and let go as the starting gesture and the closing gesture, or the starting prompt and the closing prompt of the book. Holding tight suggests perhaps an attempt to control. Letting go perhaps suggests a readiness to surrender. And agency, similarly with agency, I'm invested in, even as I'm critical of the language of agency, I feel like sometimes in Black cultural studies, we seek to assign agency, a sort of redemptive agency to figures. And sometimes we kind of impose these frameworks of quote unquote agency, where far more complex frameworks are necessary. When we talk about enslaved people, yes, enslaved people impacted, they deliberated, they planned, they moved, they acted and impacted the worlds around them. But does the sort of post-Enlightenment, sometimes liberal humanist framework of agency do justice to that? There's something before and beyond quote unquote agency that I sometimes want to tap into. Even like when I think about the language of consent, similarly, right? These languages, the language of consent and the language of agency, don't always do justice to the nuances of the mad and Black life worlds that I want to tend to.
No, there's so much there, right? That there's that it is yet again an attempt or an effort to maintain control over the uncontrollable in some ways. That fits with this next question. Thank you so much, Dr. Bruce. You mentioned the construction of human and reason is forged from Euro-colonial modernity, which reminds me of Sylvia Wynter's work on human as praxis. I was wondering if you could talk more about this construction. And I guess this person means the construction of human and reason forged from the Euro-colonial modernity.
Yeah. Sylvia Wynter talks about capital H human, much in the way that I talk about capital H reason. And she talks about the sort of the overemphasis in constructions of post-Enlightenment humanness on a very particular European and Eurocentric subject, right? And she imagines, and she knows that there's a sort of much broader, much more capacious humanness that we might aspire toward. So when we talk about the capital H human, or the capital R reason, or the capital C civil, there are so many frameworks that are codified in the Enlightenment that are categorically sort of exclusionary, and not just exclusionary, but again, are only coherent insofar as they reject, degrade, and do violence to Blackness, among other sort of vulnerable positions, statuses, sort of subject formations. Yes.
Here's an interesting, short but powerful question. Is theorizing madness harnessing madness?
Yeah, I like that. It is when I approach madness, I attempt to always do so with the explicit acknowledgement that I might fail. In Love and Madness, words fail, but I keep trying. So if that trying is harnessing, is an attempt to harness, perhaps, right? And I sort of reserve my right to ambivalence when it comes to the language of harnessing, like I do when it comes to the language of agency, where and the language of control, right? These are terms that were brought up in another question. I think, the question becomes when we sit down to systematically think about anything, are we attempting to harness it? Is the sort of process of sitting down to write a book about something an attempt to harness or to domesticate it, to sort of encage it in the bounds of our book? Is that inevitable for all of my aspirations to sort of let go? Is it inevitable that the very project of writing a book does some of that caging work? Perhaps. And I keep trying. I live in a critical ambivalence. It's my default existential posture and mode for encountering the world. Whether we're talking about, I always say this to my students, whether we're talking about Amiri Baraka's oeuvre or the Black church or Beyonce's latest album or Black masculinity, or Afro-pessimism or the Academy. I harbor critical ambivalence about all of those formations, right? A recognition that there is some utility and power and compelling and rich possibility in all of those things, and a frustration with the occasions in which those formations, those phenomena obstruct me sometimes. And it's okay to live in ambivalence. I always say that ambivalence, the sort of energetic tension and friction inside that ambivalence, where sort of contradictory impulses are rubbing against each other, that energy can be converted into a sort of kinetic liberatory possibility. Like, sit with, don't try to resolve and calm the ambivalence. Like, let that tenseness be the prelude to you leaping forth toward a liberation praxis. That's what I try to do. So I'm deeply ambivalent about, the attempt to explain a madness that maybe doesn't want to be explained. I talk in the introduction about disorientation as a method within mad methodology. And then at the same time, I realized that I was writing a book that wants to describe something clearly, or that, let me not say clearly, that has a pedagogical impulse. Right. So I'm trying to balance that at the same time, acknowledging this thing that sometimes is opaque, that resists intelligibility, with my investment, my pedagogical investment in sharing insights that might be helpful to people. Right. There's always going to be a tension there, and that's fine.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's fine, And what's beautiful about what you do is that you admit that, right?
Yes.
You admit that contradiction.
Yes, I announce it. It's
Yes.
fine, it's inevitable, and dare I say, it's desirable.
Yeah, right. And then look what we get. There are two comments that I think are important, and then a question, which will be our last question. One comment, I love your analogy of dance with madness while steadying yourself. This might be a comment for an earlier commenter, but sometimes madness can be messy. But I think, okay, I'm losing, this is moving so fast. That was a comment about the dance part of it. Someone recommended Abby Lincoln's song "Throw It Away," "Throw It Away," which is fits right in such beautiful ways with letting go. I agree with that. Okay, so here it is. I love your analogy of dance with madness, like steadying yourself, but also letting go. But sometimes madness can be messy, but I think it's how the mess can be truly powerful tool for compassion. So that was just a comment based on what you've been saying. And the question, can you speak on Audre Lorde's ideas of the erotic and your ideas on madness?
Yeah. I think the erotic connected to the love that I mentioned a few moments ago, right? Mm-hmm. The erotic, as Audre Lorde describes it resists knowing, right? It's a space where we have to lean into the sensuous, sensation, and we can find sort of tremendous exhilaration in that space where we sort of forego, again, that imperative to know, to reveal, to master, to possess, right? Which is something that many of us are taught as academics, right? To arrive at a definitive answer. The erotic resists and refuses that. So Audre Lorde's formulation of the erotic is it's one of those models, and I don't know whether I mentioned it when I was going down that litany of sort of Black feminism emboldening me to sit in the unknowable.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. We have to close. This has been just such a joy to talk to you and read you and hear you think aloud with you. Thank you for this extraordinary work, Lamar. Thank you.
Thank you. And Farah, I admire and love you so very much. And I'm so grateful to be in conversation with you now. You have no idea the sort of profound impact that you have had on me. You talk in your book about grace. And I don't know whether 20 years ago when I was in your class, whether grace was a term that you brought up frequently then, but it just so happens that I, for whatever reason, when I think about the word grace, your face appears in my mind. For real, I associate you with grace, where there have been times over the years where I know you're Farah Jasmine Griffin, but I've occasionally thought that Grace might be your name.
Well, it's one of my favorite names. So it can be your name, right? It can be the name we share. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you both so much. This was such a beautiful conversation, and I've been following the chat comments all through the evening. And Lamar, I really encourage you to go read all those beautiful comments, because there's a lot of love and appreciation and engagement with your work there. So I want to thank you so much, Farah. Thank you for being a wonderful interlocutor. Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you to the audience. And we've had a beautiful evening. Thank you so much, all of you.
And before we close, can we save these comments, or do I have to highlight, copy and paste them?
I believe they're saved. Hope will probably be able to answer that.
They're saved?
They're saved. We'll have them.
They're beautiful. So we want them.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Take care, friends.